Trump demanding answers from Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein about a possible FBI spy in his campaign.
That would be a crime of enormous magnitude, the like of which I don't believe we've ever seen in American history.
What if there was all eyes on Capitol Hill today, where Republican lawmakers are demanding a second special counsel?
I don't think that the Justice Department is going to be able to investigate themselves. I think that they've resisted our inquiries here in Congress for long enough.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announcing the administration's pressure campaign to weaken Iran's economy until it changes its behavior.
These will indeed end up being the strongest sanctions in history when we are complete.
Democrats are taking a cue from the president's playbook in a dramatic shift to their own message.
Drain the swamp.
You can't beat them, join them. You know, this is a clear effort to take and co-opt the president's very powerful anti-elite, anti-Washington message.
Freshmen at the Naval Academy scale a first-year rite of passage, all to mark the end of the year.
Yeah, you might as well jump. Live from New York City, it's hour 3 for May 22nd, 2018. Fox and Friends, the world's #1 cable morning news show. Thanks to folks like you, and Ainsley has returned from across the pond.
I did. Yesterday, my daughter got her very first trophy. And yes, everyone in the class got a trophy.
What was doing what? What do they do?
It's called Kids in Sports. It's a program they have here where they learn every week how to play one sport.
Was this week jump?
This week, that's why I thought about it, because they asked them to run around in a circle, and then they said, now jump around in a circle. So they're supposed to hop, and my daughter can't really do it. She kind of, it's really cute. Anyway, so
but
yesterday
you got a trophy
was her,
anyway.
She got a trophy anyway for participating.
Okay.
but she's 2.5. You know, I understand when you're like 7 or 8, you get the trophy if you're the best. But at this age, can't everyone get a trophy?
Look, we still like trophies.
Right.
But
she's
you don't
so
give
proud
one to
of
everybody.
She slept with it last night. It's in her crib.
All right. Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about this. There was a crazy meeting yesterday at the White House. It was the President of the United States, the guy who runs the FBI, and also the Department of Justice Deputy Attorney General. And they were all talking about Mr. Trump's tweet a couple days earlier, or the day earlier, where he said, you know, something's fishy going on there. Was there a spy inside my campaign? If so, I want answers.
Well, and you know, some people are being critical of that, but if you think about it, if you're running for president and someone is spying on you, being funded by your opponent, or being tracked to your opponent, then wouldn't you want to know about it? Wouldn't you want to know some answers? He wanted other people to do this investigation for him. No one was stepping up to the plate, so he finally holds this meeting, and he's like, you know what? I want to get to the bottom of this. You've been trying to say Russia, Russia, Russia all this time, and I'm sick of it. You didn't find anything there. So now we're starting to peel the onion apart, and we're starting to see more layers, and it looks like he's saying it looks fishy. Why did you spy on me? What was your reason? Was it politically motivated?
And there was one person, 3 meetings with Carter Page, Papadopoulos, at least 3 meetings, and at least one person with Carter Page, Papadopoulos, as well as Sam Clovis. So Judge Napolitano was here, and he just talked about, in relevance, what the big deal is and where this could be heading. Could the sitting administration be spying on the Trump campaign? Listen.
I don't believe DOJ will give everything, and I'll tell you why. Because under the law, the DOJ has the right to keep from everyone information that's presented to a grand jury or information that would expose a source when they're still in the midst of a criminal investigation. As ugly as this sounds, Mueller's investigation is a criminal investigation. The subject of that investigation is the President of the United States. Right. They would never tip their hand to the President or anybody about what they have and where they're going until the investigation is over. And they've either written a report about him, charged them with something, or exonerated them.
So there you've got the judge talking about how, going forward, it was brokered yesterday, John F. Kelly will be essentially the referee when it comes to all those congressional Republicans who want all these confidential and top secret documents. He will broker it between the Department of Justice and the FBI and Congress. But then, and it all revolves yesterday regarding the tweet around that perhaps spy, the confidential source inside the campaign. Michael Caputo, who was with the Trump campaign for a while, he says there could be more than one person who infiltrated the Trump circle. And if that's true, this could be very bad for some familiar names from the Obama White House.
But let me tell you something that I know for a fact. This informant, this person that they tried to plan into the campaign and even into the administration, if you believe Axios, he's not the only person that came at the campaign. And the FBI is not the only Obama agency that came at the campaign. I know because they came at me. And I'm looking for clearance from my attorney to reveal this to the public. This is just the beginning. And I'll tell you, when we finally find out the truth about this, Director Clapper and the rest of them are going to be wearing some orange suits.
And this guy has paid a lot because of the Mueller investigation, because of the House investigation. Michael Caputo, who's not even with the Trump campaign, and I believe was a volunteer, even though he was playing a vital role and had some president respect, left when Corey Lewandowski left because of an ill-advised tweet about Corey Lewandowski's exit. And he's still a friend of the president. He has paid, I think he had to remortgage his house over in Buffalo, his financial issues, because you need the top lawyer because so much is at stake. And his big sin was being friends with the president. Michael Flynn, same thing. He had to go ahead and maybe cut a deal because he couldn't even afford to make his house payments after a while.
Right.
It's just about doing the right thing. No matter if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat, if they are sending someone in, if any political party is sending someone in to spy on an opponent, that is wrong. That's wrong. And we need to know the answers and why it was done.
Right. And so you've got these congressional Republicans. They are, keep in mind, with three co-equal branches of government, you've got Congress, which has oversight over the administration, which is the Department of Justice and the FBI. But according to a number of congressional Republicans, the Department of Justice has been stonewalling when it comes to getting some of these documents. So that's why Congressman Ron DeSantis of Florida is one of three lawmakers, including Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan, calling for a second special counsel. Why? Listen.
We need people to be held accountable for how the Hillary email investigation was conducted, and we're going to get a lot of information on that when the IG report lands, hopefully very soon. But we also need to get people to be held accountable for any FISA abuse that occurred. And then how did this investigation into the Trump campaign start, and was it on the up and up from the very beginning? There's always a lot of questions about that, and I don't think that the Justice Department is going to be able to investigate themselves. I think that they've resisted our inquiries here in Congress for long enough, and so it's time that we did have a special counsel.
Senator Graham said something similar. I don't think this country needs another special counsel on anything. This doesn't work. It's not effective. It just further divides the country. I understand the frustration on the right and the left, depending on where the target is.
Right.
But my goodness, it's so debilitating, the taxing, what it takes out of you,
Right.
what we're not doing because of it.
But, Brian, do you trust the Department of Justice to investigate themselves?
Well, the Department of Justice,
Because
who
that's
was
what
hired
it's
by
calling
the
here.
president, should be at least responsive to the president. He hauled him in yesterday, and there's an inspector general overseeing it. And if you have an investigation and James Clapper or John Brennan or any of the other, or James Comey don't show up, they'll say a lot because the inspector general is able to get a lot out of it.
Right, but the inspector general
I agree
cannot
with Alan
get-
Dershowitz
he
in
doesn't
saying
have-
that the country does not benefit from this. The 9/11 style investigation, when people aren't defensive, when they can be open and say, how do we fix this?
Right.
That's when it works.
But here's the thing. The Inspector General, which is what they're talking about right there between the White House and the congressional Republicans yesterday, he doesn't have subpoena power. He can't get James Comey in. He can't get Mr. Clapper in. They can't impanel a grand jury. And so that's why a lot of people go, you know what, I don't see how they can investigate themselves.
Are you going to look at the IG report, which is due out this month, which has got to be next week or next week? Are you going to look at it differently? Are there conclusions because they didn't have subpoena power?
Well, listen, according to the reports today, apparently the IG report savages James Comey for not moving fast enough to get a warrant into Hillary's email server.
People don't care how it's done.
Yeah.
They just want it over.
You want the
They
answers.
want the answers. But if you do have a special counsel, it is another investigation.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
muddying the waters even more.
And it just divides it red and blue.
Right.
And I don't care where you stand.
Oh, we're
Nobody
divided.
benefits.
Okay, do you remember on the campaign trail? Of course you do. The president yelling out, drain the swamp, and the
Yeah.
crowds would say, drain the swamp. Well, he was talking about Nancy Pelosi, right? Chuck Schumer, all the people that have been in Washington.
The establishment.
That's right, the establishment, that are not getting anything done in his minds. Well, now you have those two people who are considered the swamp. Now they want to join the swamp. That's the new Democratic slogan. Listen to this.
President Trump has embraced the most egregious establishment Republican norms and appointed the most conflict of interest-ridden cabinet in my lifetime. The swamp has never been more foul or more fetid than under this president.
Instead of delivering on his promise to drain the swamp, President Trump has become the swamp. We want Republicans and their corrupt, big donor-driven agenda to get out of the way. It has given the American people a raw deal.
Apparently, the Democrats' internal polling have shown that in the upcoming election, they want folks to do something about corruption in Washington. And so that's why they're going to pull the plug on the swamp.
We asked you guys to weigh in on this, and Ricky says you can't get them to drain their own swimming pools.
David says the Democrats couldn't come up with a message, so they stole one that works for President Trump. What's next? Blue MAGA hats?
Nancy Pelosi did use that in 2006, by the way. And a tweet from John. Since they're taking drain the swamp, maybe next year we'll hear Chuck and Nancy saying, build the wall. Funny stuff. All right, keep the email coming and the tweets and whatnot because we read them all day long.
So it was Nancy Pelosi's slogan in 2006?
Yep, when she was working to be speaker.
And I am fascinated as we turn over to Jillian and take a wide shot, maybe from Ted. Thanks, Ted. I'm fascinated to see there's crowdfunding for the wall. More people have written us saying, well, why don't we just do a way to finance the wall on our own? So crowdfunding starts with Congresswoman Diane Black. I bet you they get enough money.
How much is
$25 billion
in the pot now?
They'll get $25 billion.
No.
How much you want to bet? How much you want to bet? $25 billion.
Bet you 50 cents. Okay. New threats days after the deadly high school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas. 2 students at nearby schools allegedly brought guns with them to campus on the first day back to class after Friday's rampage. Threats also reported at 3 other nearby schools. Meantime, today, Texas Governor Greg Abbott will hold the first of several roundtable discussions on gun violence. The search for 2 escaped inmates and suspected killers widening to 3 states. 3 men taking less than 10 minutes to escape from the Orangeburg, South Carolina detention center after a control board malfunctioned and unlocked cell doors. One of them was captured. His dad, now locked up too, accused of helping him. 2 are still on the loose right there, both charged with murder. Voting is underway in 4 southern states holding primaries today. In Georgia, a crowded Republican field for governor as 5 candidates seek the nomination. In Arkansas, incumbent Governor Asa Hutchinson is hoping to ride out his fresh endorsement from President Trump. He's facing a challenge from Jan Morgan. Runoff voting is just underway in Texas, while polls are also open in Georgia, Kentucky, and Arkansas. Let's look at your headlines. Back to you.
We will have the results tomorrow.
Yes, we will.
Thanks, Jillian.
All right. Meanwhile, Iran is on notice. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo threatening to impose the strongest sanctions in history on Iran. So what would that be? We're going to talk to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, Andrew Peek. He's next.
And are you ready for Obama TV? You can soon binge watch Barack and Michelle Obama's work on Netflix. They just signed a contract.
By unprecedented financial pressure on the Iranian regime. The sting of sanctions will be painful if the regime does not change its course from the unacceptable and unproductive path it has chosen to one that rejoins the League of Nations. These will indeed end up being the strongest sanctions in history when we are complete.
Wow, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo putting Iran on notice. Here with the latest Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and former U.S. Army Intelligence Officer Andrew Peek. Andrew, what do you think was accomplished yesterday as Mike Pompeo laid out 12 demands on the Iranian regime?
Well, I think what the world has wanted to see is the way forward from the president's May 8th announcement that we are leaving the Iranian nuclear deal. And I thought what the secretary laid out was exactly that. Was the unprecedented economic pressure, the deterrence of Iranian malign behavior in the region and destabilizing activities, and the tireless advocacy for the Iranian people. People have wanted to know what comes next. This is what comes next.
Well, right afterwards, their foreign minister, Zarif, who negotiated the deal with John Kerry says U.S. diplomacy a sham is merely a regression to old habits, imprisoned by delusions and failed policies dictated by corrupt special interests. It repeats the same wrong choices that will thus reap the same ill rewards. Iran, meanwhile, is working with partners for the post-U.S. JCPOA. Because he's right about this, it looks like Europe wants to stay in the deal and Iran will stay. So are you making Europe make a choice, and are they deciding Iran over us?
Well, you know, the silver lining of the Iranian threat is really that we all agree that it's a threat. And we all agree that over the past 3 years, it's gotten oftentimes worse since the JCPOA was signed. Iran's behavior in the region has become more unstable. It has become more aggressive, with missiles landing in Saudi Arabia. As we fan out now and engage our partner countries around the world at the State Department and in the other departments in the U.S. government, we're going to be making that case, and I think we're going to find a lot of agreement among our partners.
Not yet, and they're really ticked off you left, although it's hard for me to say that we shouldn't have stayed, that we should have ever got into it in the meantime, in the first place, because the Senate and House didn't even have majorities that supported it. Senator Schumer and Senator Ben Cardin didn't support it. So they fundamentally, have you gotten Democrats on board with your new tough policy?
Look, I think that is exactly what people often forget or want to forget, is that the Iranian nuclear deal was submitted to Congress as an agreement because it didn't have support to be a treaty. And that was a heuristic of the bipartisan opposition to the weak terms in it. I think as we move forward, there is going to be a lot of support for this new approach. I think people often play politics with this, perhaps on the Democratic side of the aisle. But I think there will be support as we move forward.
Well, we'll see. No doubt about it. You want to put the pressure back on them because that move which made them compliant to begin with. Thanks so much, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
All right, 10 minutes before the bottom of the hour. She tipped off illegal immigrants that ICE was coming. Now one congressman wants to make sure Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf or any other mayor can never do it again. The brand new bill she inspired just ahead. Plus, our next guest is warning Americans over having fewer and fewer children as the U.S. birth rate hits a record low. Why it matters next. And I still had 3 seconds. Can you believe it? Is under arrest in connection to the murder of that Baltimore police officer. A manhunt now intensifying for 3 other suspects. Hour after veteran female cop is killed responding to a call. Todd Pyro has been following the story. He is live in the newsroom with more of the breaking developments. Todd.
Brian, just moments ago, Baltimore County Police confirmed that a 16-year-old was arrested. His name and his charges will be released after his bail hearing today. In fact, he was arrested yesterday, but police are just announcing his arrest now. Like you said, 3 suspects still on the loose. They are considered armed and dangerous. Right now, a heavy police presence expected as schools open after students were locked in their buildings well into the evening yesterday. According to the Baltimore County Police Chief, the female officer was responding to a possible burglary when witnesses say she got run over by a Jeep. And as we've been saying, this marks the 26th officer killed on the job this year alone. The unidentified officer would have marked 4 years on the force in July. Just a horrible story here. Back to you.
All right. Thanks, Todd. Hopefully we have more news of other arrests shortly. Meanwhile, 5 minutes before the bottom of the hour, let's go over to Ainsley and Steve.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Americans apparently having fewer children than ever before.
The Centers for Disease Control reporting that women in the United States had children at the lowest rate, just over 60 births for every 1,000. And our next guest says there could be major political and societal impacts in the future.
Here with more, research fellow at the Hoover Institution, Jeremy Carl. Jeremy, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Welcome. So why is this? Why are fewer Americans having babies?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. There's financial reasons. There's legal reasons that are scaring some men out of the marriage market, I think. And I think there's value reasons, unfortunately. I think we're very much in a live for today's society right now. That's the message we often get from Hollywood. And anybody who's had kids will tell you kids are an investment. And a lot of people are not willing to make that investment right now, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Time and financially.
I know. You should know. You've got 5 kids yourself. But in this great report you have written, you talk a lot about how the bigger families in the United States right now are the people who can least afford it.
That's right. If you look at the fertility rate in the United States, it's perfectly inversely correlated with income. So the more and more money you make, the fewer and fewer children that you have. And from the perspective of keeping afloat things like Social Security and Medicare over the long term, that plus the fact that we're not even replacing our current population with the birth rate, that has huge impacts for whether we're going to be able to afford those sorts of things in the future.
Do you think our parents' generation had something to do with it? Because we watched them, most of them had kids. They got married to the first person they were in love with when they were 20, 21 years old, and then they start having babies immediately. And do you think that generation told us, okay, figure out your career, you know kids are
Take your
expensive,
time.
it was stressful when you were growing up, don't do that to your kids?
I think that was probably some of it. I think we live in a more consumer society where people have greater expectations. And you know, I live in a quite well-off area, and I'm always stunned by the number of people who tell me, well, we can't afford, you know, X number of kids. And I think back to my great-great-grandfather, who was a cigar maker, and he had 9 children, you know, all of whom grew up and did, you know, good things with their lives, and he was able to afford doing that.
Right.
And it wasn't so much that he had money, but that he made a value choice. And I think increasingly, unfortunately, we're not doing that, and it may be messages from our parents and things like that are playing a role there.
So looking forward, Jeremy, what's your worry?
Well, my worry is that in the current situation that we're in, that we're not going to have people to pay for the Social Security for people who are growing old or Medicare. All these things kind of require a workforce out there. I think I have another sort of side worry, and I touch on this in the piece that I wrote, that there's a lot of, when people look at this, a lot of the politicians are saying, well, we'll just fix this by bringing in more immigrants. And my point is there is no substitute for having and raising our own children. It doesn't mean that we can't value immigrants or that immigrants can't bring something to the U.S., but we can't bring in immigrants as a substitute for doing the job of raising our own families here in the United States. And that's, unfortunately, I think a lot of politicians, even some on the right, unfortunately, are just treating immigrants like they're just a worker and not a person that is going to have an impact.
Great points. Jeremy Carl, he's written this great piece. We will link to your piece from our website, foxandfriends.com. Jeremy, thank you very much for joining us today from Stanford, out
Congratulations.
in California.
5 kids. Wouldn't that be fun? I bet your house is a lot of fun. Thanks, Jeremy. All right, you just
thanks so much for having
heard.
me.
You're welcome.
His house is noisy.
Well, you just heard a teenager was arrested in connection to the murder of that Baltimore police officer. Dana Lash is here to react to that, coming up next.
And President Trump unleashing capitalism, making America open for business. Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin is here to tell us how his state is thriving in this pro-business economy. The this hour in connection to the murder of a Baltimore police officer yesterday. His name and his charges will be released after his bail hearing later today. He was arrested yesterday, but police are just now announcing it. A manhunt is now underway, intensifying for 3 other suspects considered armed and dangerous.
According to the Baltimore County Police Chief, the female officer was responding to a possible burglary when witnesses say she was run over by a Jeep.
Wow, this marks the 26th officer killed on the job this year. 26 so far. Let's bring in Dana Lash. She's a nationally syndicated radio host of The Dana Show and NRA spokesperson. Dana, what's your reaction?
Well, I'm just now seeing exactly what you're seeing. I mean, it's absolutely awful to see something like this. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we back the blue, and I hope that it reinforces, just what our men and women in uniform, what they go through every single time they put on the badge, every single time they put on the uniform. I mean, it's a dangerous job, and it's getting more dangerous for law enforcement.
Indeed. In fact, that's the sentiment of the police chief in the Baltimore area. Listen to this, Dana.
It's terrible. We're seeing something in this country today that we've never seen before. We're seeing police officers assaulted. The number of officers who have died in the line of duty is up this year. The officers who've died at the hands of gunshots is up. And so we're telling everybody, be on your toes, don't be complacent. Work with each other. This is a bad time in the United States for law enforcement and the attacks that are occurring.
And if you want to know how bad it's getting, at this time last year, 15 officers had lost their lives. Now it's up to 26. Last year, it capped out at 35. Sadly, it looks like we're going to get way past that before the summer starts. This continues. So you just wonder if this is an attitude in America today.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I think there is something there to that. I know there's a general, I think, lack of respect for each other and authority, and just making sure that we all live nicely and in harmony with everybody. But at the same time, with law enforcement, I think it's trendy to hate cops right now. I honestly do. I think it's trendy to hate cops. I think it's trendy to bash cops, and I think it's a lot of people believe that it's very easy for them to Sunday morning quarterback a cop's decisions through the keyboard, which I don't like to see, particularly when those people have no law enforcement training.
We all know what happened in Santa Fe in Texas, and Governor Abbott is going to host a roundtable discussion, 3 days of roundtable discussions to make schools safer in that state. He wants to speed up background checks, policies to keep guns away from those who pose an immediate danger. He wants more resources for school safety personnel, and he wants to address mental illness issues tied to gun violence. What are your thoughts, Dana?
Right. Ainsley, these are all issues that I have talked about for a very, very long time, since the now infamous town hall that took place when those suggestions were roundly booed. We've been talking about the School Shield program, which I hope that schools across the country realize that these resources are available to them. But if I can make one quick point, this is what I think everyone who has children in schools needs to realize right now. They need to realize this happened in Broward County. I talked to teachers in Broward County at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School. Right. They had a Secret Service member do a security risk assessment 2 months before. None of those things were put into place. You had a promise program that actually didn't report the criminality of students, and that prevented a record from being established for the murderer, and he could have been rendered a prohibited possessor. Parents need to make sure that these programs are not in their kids' schools. We need to make sure that we're funding security measures. How about we take the $500 million from Planned Parenthood and redirect that into making sure that our schools are secure, and that we have armed security, and that we have metal detectors. We are protecting our sporting events and concerts more.
Sure, Dana, as an NRA spokesperson, over the last couple of months, we've been hearing more and more, including the President of the United States, talking about we should be arming our teachers. And in fact, that's one of the things that Greg Abbott is going to be talking about, Governor Abbott, there in your state today.
Yes, and I think if teachers and parents determine each for their school district that this is something that they want to implement, and teachers volunteer, they're willing to train, they're willing to carry. Teachers are incredibly talented people, and I don't think they get the credit they deserve. They can teach our students, and they can defend their own lives, and if heaven forbid all else fails, defend the lives of students. But if we have armed school resource officers, we do what Dan Patrick was discussing, making sure that we're watching access points and exit points. And that our perimeters are safe, double locking doors. This is a multi-layer thing, and not a lot of people realize that. That's what Patrick is discussing. That's what Greg Abbott is discussing. And I think that it's the least that we can do for our children and teachers.
Right. Thousands of schools in states that are healthy like Florida, they indeed acted. They're training these guardians right now with hundreds of hours, but the states that are hurting, they don't know where they're going to get their resources from. Maybe that's where the federal government steps in.
School Shield, they need to call us. We are more than happy to help, and our resources are at their disposal.
All right. Thank you, Dana. Great to see you this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some more headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning. And we have some dramatic body cam footage capturing a gunfight at President Trump's Florida golf club. This all went down after a man with a gun walked into Trump Doral. He draped an American flag over the front desk, started yelling about the president, and pulled the fire alarm. Police eventually shooting him in the legs. During this bizarre exchange in court, he admitted to setting off the alarm.
Happy push alarm.
Sir, everything's being recorded. Your attorney turned the microphone off, though. Probably a wise move.
Nobody was seriously hurt. Tip off illegals and you could go to prison even if you're mayor. That's the message Iowa Congressman Steve King is sending to all sanctuary cities under his proposed law. The Mayor Libby Schaaf Act, named for the California mayor who warned about an ICE raid in February.
There is potentially an ICE activity planned in the Bay Area. Residents should know that they do not have an obligation to open their doors if an ICE official knocks.
Under the measure, government officials could face up to 5 years in prison. From the White House to the movies, the Obamas signing a multi-year deal to produce films and series for Netflix. The deal includes scripted and unscripted series, as well as documentaries and features. Former President Obama saying they hope to, quote, promote greater empathy and understanding between peoples and help them share their stories with the entire world. The first content from the Obamas will appear in 2019. From battling blazes to dad duties, these heroes have their hands full. An Oklahoma fire department welcoming 7 babies over the last year. Look at these photos. The 5 girls and 2 boys coming together for a special photo shoot with their dad's equipment. The families say they are looking forward to watching them all grow up together. Isn't that adorable?
That is so cute.
Love it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. There was one rogue baby. Did you see the one they're all on top of their daddy's uniforms? There was one that was in the middle of the circle.
Taking off. All right. Meanwhile, 19 minutes before the top of the hour, Adam is outside. Adam, it's a pretty nice day here in New York City.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous day in here in New York City, and I'm with some people who are a little disappointed. All right, be honest. Janice Dean wasn't here. What were you guys thinking? Kind of collectively.
Happy with you.
I get it. I get why you'd be disappointed not to see Janice Dean, but have I won you over? Can I get?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm about to ruin that because I'm talking about rain that's coming in to ruin some of these folks' vacations. Here's a look at the maps moving across the country. Really the largest amount of rain moving towards the East Coast, so New York City, D.C., running up towards Boston. All areas where we're going to see some afternoon showers. But I need to know, will you forgive me? What's your name?
Emily?
Emily, will you forgive me for if it rains here later on your holiday?
Yes.
Okay. See, well, I've been forgiven. Janice, you are missed. Guys, that's it.
All right, Adam. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, 18 minutes before the top of the hour. President Trump unleashing capitalism, making America open for business. Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin understands that. He's here to tell us how his state is thriving in the pro-business economy of 2018.
And a special charity motorcycle ride hits the road to honor American service members stationed overseas. Auto expert Mike Caudill, he was there. And now he is here to share his experience. And he brought in his skinny coffee scam on Instagram. A dietitian tells the New York Post there isn't solid evidence of weight loss, even though some ads promise to help people drop weight fast. The ingredients can reportedly lead to negative side effects like anxiety, poor sleep, and potential liver damage. And women are throwing off their heels and lacing up their sneakers. Sales for high-heeled shoes dropped 11% last year, but sneaker sales jumped 37%. Experts say heels can lead to lower back, neck, and shoulder pain since they disrupt the natural form of the body. Steve?
Now you know. All right. Ainsley, according to the president, America is open for business, and leaders in one state can't agree more. Unemployment in the state of Kentucky dropping to a record low of 4%, the lowest since 1976, with $14.5 billion in new investments and nearly 40,000 new jobs. What's going on there? Let's talk to the governor of the great state of Kentucky, Governor Matt Bevin. He's a Republican. He joins us live. Good morning to you.
Great to be with you.
What is going on in Kentucky?
I think the same things that are happening in a lot of places, although we'd like to think we're doing a little more of it, and that is just making sure that we are indeed open for business. It's a catchphrase. Everyone says it. Right. But what are we doing in terms of workforce development? What are we doing in terms of tax environment, in terms of labor environment, in terms of passing the type of legislation that send a message to the business world that we want your business, cutting regulation and red tape. This little button that I wear, pair of scissors cutting through red tape. I started a website, redtapereduction.com, and asked the public, tell us anything you don't like that regulates you that you would like us to eliminate if possible.
Well, what is different about this president than past presidents? I mean, everybody wants to say, hey, America's open for business, but you say things are different this time.
He's actually doing things about it. Again, it's easy to say these things. But you look at how he has stirred the pot both domestically and globally as it relates to onshoring business and capital. You look at the tax policy that came out and the cuts that came out last year. This repatriation of money is significant. Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that would have been otherwise taxed. Those dollars are being redeployed. They're coming to states like ours, where we are the engineering and manufacturing hub of America, right there in Kentucky and in the Midwest.
One of the interesting things is, if you live in the big towns on the coast, you see a lot of Donald Trump did this and he's screwing up the country and stuff like that. Out in Kentucky, what are people talking about? Are they talking about Stormy Daniels? Are they talking about her lawyer? Are they talking about Russia collusion? What's the topic?
They really don't care. I tell you, I mean, I was asked this about the Washington Post. I hate to name them by name, but people don't read that. They don't care what is said in that periodical. They just don't. And so to that end, the people out there care about jobs. They care about employment. They care about safety and security for their families. They care about the fact that there's an upside potential for their children that, at least in theory, but also in reality, is shaping up, that did not exist a generation ago. And they respect that this president is someone who delivers on his word. And people may like him, they may dislike him, but he is a guy who actually said he was going to do certain things, and he's doing it. And that is highly respected in a state like Kentucky.
Sincerely. A lot of people are looking for someplace to go on vacation this summer. Gee, I wonder who could say something nice about why to go to Kentucky.
Yeah, I tell you what, for those who like bourbon, it has become quite the hop.
Sold.
The Bourbon Trail, really. But if the horse farms, the caves that we have, the rivers, the lakes.
It's a beautiful state.
In a stunning, stunning place. It really is.
All right. Governor Matt Bevin of Kentucky. Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Straight ahead, a special charity motorcycle ride hit the roads to honor American service members stationed overseas. Car expert Mike Goddell, he was there. He's going to share the experience next. But first, let's check in with Sandra Smith for a preview of what happens on the channel in 10 minutes.
Hey, Steve, good morning to you.
Morning.
Well, a group of congressional Republicans calling for a second special counsel to look into misconduct at the highest levels of the DOJ and the FBI. Congressman Lee Zeldin signed that letter. He joins us live. Plus, the president seems to have struck a deal with the Justice Department regarding an FBI informant. We have the latest. And Starbucks says all are welcome, purchase or not. Reactions pouring in over this controversial new policy. Join us in America's Newsroom in about 10 minutes.